This is the CUNYCast, smart voices, good stories, and thought-provoking conversation from the City University of New York. I'm Rick Firstman. When John F. Kennedy made a campaign swing through New York in 1960, the press corps that day included an 18-year-old photographer for the weekly Flatbush Life named Stan Wolfson. Over the next couple of decades, he captured countless moments in time for the World Telegram and Sun, and then Newsday. Everything from the Great Blackout of 1965 to his famous shot of David Berkowitz being booked on the night of his arrest, to a trove of feature photos including one of his personal favorites, Martin Luther King riding a bicycle on Fire Island. But it all came to an abrupt halt when Stan barely survived a helicopter crash while covering the Long Island Marathon for Newsday in 1978. After a year of recovery, he returned as a photo editor for the paper, and then in 2004 he joined CUNY as the photo editor for our Office of Communications and Marketing. Stan retired this summer, so we thought this was an occasion for a podcast with one of our own. And I might mention that Stan and I go way back, having been colleagues at both Newsday and CUNY. So here's my conversation with Stan Wolfson looking back at his 60-year career in pictures. And as a bonus, we put some of his favorite photos into a video, so be sure to check it out on our episode page. Hi, Stan. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey, Rick. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Great. So you spent the past 16 years as the CUNY Communications Office photo editor, but you spent a long career as a New York newspaper photographer and editor that goes back decades, all the way back, to 1960, right? And you were just 18. So bring us back to 18-year-old Stan Wolfson. One of your first shots that you remember is John Kennedy campaigning for president back in 1960.
Right. Well, those were the days when it was a lot looser. I was on the campaign trail with him. He did a number of rallies. We did drive-through neighborhoods, Flatbush neighborhood in Brooklyn, Kings Highway, Eastern Parkway. It was a wonderful, crazy experience. I mean, when you look back and reflect of what you did at a younger age when you were reckless, it was quite interesting.
So how'd you get your start in the newspaper business at that age?
Well, I started at the World Telegram and Sun as a copy boy, which is nothing more than a glorified clerk, which today doesn't exist. And from there, I wound up going up to the photo lab. There was an opportunity and became a photographer for the World Telegram and Sun.
Now, these were the romantic days of New York journalism, and there were a lot of newspapers. In fact, how many were there in those days? Must have been 8 or 10.
Yeah, had the Daily News, Daily Mirror, the Times, the Herald Tribune, World Telegram and Sun, the New York Post, and the Journal American.
So it must have been very competitive, especially for a photographer.
Well, it was extremely competitive on major stories, because besides the newspaper photographers, on a major event, the Channel 2, 4, and 7 would have their local crew. They would have a national crew. But you always seem to find yourself and get into the right place at the right time. When I look at the body of work from your career, especially those years in the 60s and 70s, some really memorable shots. One of the earlier ones was the blackout, the Great Blackout of 1965. Tell me about that. I was on my way home from work. My wife was home with a newly born son, and the lights just went out on the Brooklyn Bridge. And that was probably one of the nicest times that anybody could have spent in the city of New York. Everybody was extremely cooperative. People were jumping into cars. You went through the neighborhood streets in Brooklyn. people were out directing traffic. Everybody would do whatever they could for you. I also wound up back in downtown Brooklyn at the Promenade, where I photographed this freighter lighting the skyline of Lower Manhattan, and it was the only lights that were visible. The city was black.
So the shot is this ship all lit up?
It's all lit up.
Yeah, and the only thing anywhere.
That made the front page, and I also wound up a week later getting an invitation from the owners of the ship that were enthralled with the picture, because they had me over for brunch on the freighter, and obviously they invited me to take a cruise with them, which obviously I didn't.
That same year, Malcolm X was assassinated. And, you know, as it happens, a few weeks ago I was reading The New Yorker, and they had an excerpt of a new biography of Malcolm X by our longtime Newsday colleague Les Payne. And it was accompanied by, lo and behold, a photo by you.
And that Sunday was a beautiful day, and the only reason I remember that was that I knew about the rally that Malcolm X was having at the Audubon. I was going up to cover it, but was sidetracked by the weather itself, and was making weather pictures in Central Park. And when I finished that, I started heading up to the Audubon Theater, and I hear on the radio that there was an attempted killing of Malcolm at the theater. So obviously I sped up a little faster to get up there. When I arrived at the scene, obviously the ballroom was cleared. The only ones inside were the police checking for ballistic shots. And that's when I was able to make the picture. They were working on the podium, and you can see in the background where the bullet holes were. So it was the best that I could do to recapture something that happened there.
Right. So you moved on to Newsday in the late 60s out on Long Island. And in 1969, you were sent up to Cape Cod to cover the Ted Kennedy Chappaquiddick story, right?
Let me just back up a little and brought it with Ted Kennedy, that I had spent a day with the senator in Washington. We were doing a profile on him, and I spent the entire day. It was fascinating. Not much in words had transpired between the senator and myself. And then on the way back to his office, bunch of young ladies come chasing after him. And we're running up the steps. I'm taking pictures. And once we got inside the building, the senator turns to me and says, "You earned your money now." And that sort of broke the ice and made the day a lot more pleasant. We were more friendlier terms at that point. And then, with the Chappaquiddick incident, they wound up sending me up, figuring I had some firsthand knowledge, and interchange with the senator. And you see, I came up with a picture of him wearing the neck brace. That was outside the church after the funeral service. And then unbeknownst to me, I wound up flying back to New York on the same plane as a number of the young ladies that were there, who were at Chappaquiddick at the time of the incident. But the one thing that I do remember distinctly is when I'm sitting in the front of the plane, and the stewardess had asked me and a number of the other us that were up if we would move back to the rear of the plane for stability. And that was a very reassuring time as the plane took off and we came back to New York.
Right. So fast forwarding a few years to 1977, and that was the summer when New York was terrorized by the the serial killer named Son of Sam, and you came away with quite a shot that night.
We had a late Tom McGuire, who was the photo editor, on that night. And Tom always had a habit of deep breath. And then he said to me, did I wake you? And I said, no, Tom, I knew you were going to call me. I had this premonition, so I've been up all night waiting for your call. So that started the exchange of the night. I had to go down to Central Booking in Brooklyn, which was down near basically the foot of the Manhattan Bridge. And I wound up going behind the police desk. I'm the only media person that was able to do it. I was back there. And in those days, there was an understanding between the media and the cops. And the police, if you were in there, they didn't bother you unless you did something absurd. So nobody bothered me, and I wound up with the only one having pictures of him surrounded by detectives as he's being booked.
So you had the only sort of head-on shot that night when he was arrested.
I'm the only one. Only head-on. Yeah, I was the only one that got the head-on shot. I mean, it was a zoo when they took him out of the station house. I mean, you're fighting through the police detail that's surrounding him, plus the media. So, I came out a winner on that one. And then, my experience at Newsday, I was fortunate. I spent the day with Dr. King on Fire Island when he was out raising funds, and on the way back to the ferry, because the ferry was the only way you were able to get on and off at Fire Island, he was able to obtain a bike and starts bike riding, and I have the picture of him riding a bike on Fire Island, which is something different of Dr. King. You always see him close up, and I came across on the ferry with him and back on the ferry, but the bike to me was just something totally different.
Well, sometimes you get lucky, right?
That's it. That's, look, being a newspaper photographer, it's timing, it's luck, it's skill, it's a combination of everything.
Well, that's a great way to segue to something where you really were not lucky at all. Timing is everything, and luck. This went very wrong.
It was Long Island's first Long Island Marathon, and Newsday, being the paper of record on the island, was the sponsor of the event. And I was flying in a helicopter that crashed. The fuel pump came apart.
What do you remember about crashing, if anything?
The only thing that I've ever been able to remember, and I didn't happen immediately. I woke up in the hospital, and I can been able to piece together the alarm system going off in the helicopter, veering over, and that's it. To this day, I've never been able to put anything back together aside from that. I mean, I became the local celebrity in the ICU when all the doctors that ran in the marathon had to come and see this person that crashed in the helicopter. They all stopped by to say hello to me. So,
Well, I guess it's a good thing, actually, that you really don't remember the actual crash, right?
No, that's it. I mean, the mind is unbelievable. I have initially I couldn't remember anything. Initially, when I woke up on the gurney in the emergency room there, I just thought it was a bad dream. If I close my eyes, I'll get up and it'll all be over with. But it wasn't, and I was able to, my film and cameras, I was able to give to a reporter, so the images were saved.
And but you were severely injured, and you were out for better part of a year.
I was out for Yeah, I was close to a year. I have 4 compression fractures in my day. I missed by centimeters of being a paraplegic. So,
Wow.
I'm consider myself very fortunate. But that also was a way that I was reschooled and became a photo editor, or as I use, a bureaucrat. So it was, a total retooling situation. I was fortunate Newsday just didn't throw me out on a heat pile, and they were willing to give me a chance at being a photo editor and retool myself.
And you did that for, 25 years or so, and retired in 2000?
Yeah, I was at, right. Yeah, I was at Newsday for 38 years total. So, and I had, being a desk editor, again, I guess one of the highlights of the career there was it took me 4 years to pull it off, but, I was able to get the, Grumman people, to, let us have a photographer come in and document, the F-14. Initially I wanted the final F-14 because I knew the contract was over, and once the contract is over, which I didn't know at the time, they basically smashed to smithereens the molds, so you can never build that plane again. And I ran into a lot of opposition with the public relations department, and they had a breakfast with the CEO of Grumman at the time, and I was able to corner him after the meeting. Not only did he love the idea, we wound up photographing the last F-14 being manufactured on the assembly line all the way through. And then I was looking to get the plane flying over Montauk, the Montauk Lighthouse, and I went with the photographer at the time who had documented this. Joe Dombrowski had documented all of the F-14, and I went out there at Calverton where it took out because they were going to deliver it to the Navy. And I met the pilot, and the pilot turns around to me and he says, "You got your day, didn't you?" So it shows you, it all, in the end, it was a 4-year project, but it really worked well at the end. So,
you left Newsday and joined CUNY back in about 2002 or so. And so what was it like to transition from that newspaper career to this huge university?
It was totally different. It was a different atmosphere. CUNY is, to my knowledge, the most diverse university system in the country, and we wanted to show this. And you find out that everybody did their own thing. There was no real centralization in a public relations type of thing where you can basically show off how diverse the university is and how many different opportunities we had. And then, so this was a challenge. Nobody really kept an archiving system. It was images thrown in somebody's desk, in a closet, very little caption information. So, we had Andre Beckles, who was staff and did a number of other things at CUNY. He was the institution. I mean, he knew these people. He grew up with these people, and you just didn't have that. And that knowledge doesn't exist. I mean, people didn't realize the people that have passed through the university system as a whole through the decades. And there were no identification. I mean, you could have had Cassius Clay at a college. Nobody would have known. If you look at images, most people wouldn't recognize who it was. So we try to put together something that could basically highlight what the university was doing, how it was doing it, and the populace. I mean, where are you going to find the most diverse group of students anywhere else? So it was a challenge.
So you spent years collecting, hunting down, gathering, cataloging, going into basements, talking to people, just trying to gather a really solid archive of showing the history of the university. One of the most important projects and successful that you did as the CUNY photo editor was, you mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. on a bike, but now you were looking for connections to CUNY. How did that come about?
Martin Luther King gave a commencement address at City College, of which City College doesn't even have a photo of. There was a student by the name of Summerstein who I found in doing just a Google search on the internet looking for King pictures, and stumbled into Summerstein. Had a couple of pictures up, nothing of King, but of the march in Selma. And this went on for months between me being a real pain and convincing him that he's telling me he went on the march as a student and he documented all of that. And they were somewhere in shoe boxes or wherever in his stuff. And so until I finally prodded him long enough and being a real pain, he produced a wonderful set of images that we wound up using. And then I had to push him further because he was a student there at the time that Dr. King came and addressed the students. And he did, after months, this was, another project in itself, he found an image of King at giving his address for graduation that year.
And the real find was the photographs that Summerstein shot as a student going to the Selma March.
Right. The Selma March images were wonderful. And, he had this, what I would consider a spectacular picture from behind Dr. King, which has been, we used it. It's been picked up for the movie when they did it now. And then he had a New York Historical Society, had his work on exhibit afterwards. We still have the images on the Chancellor's floor at CUNY Central. I mean, to me, I always found it unbelievable. Here's a student. He went, he documented it, and CUNY Archives at the City College, which has a pretty, has an archive of images. They have no trace of this. I mean, it came and it disappeared. And, a lot of CUNY's history has been lost that way.
Right. But you found a lot of it, so.
Yeah, I mean, it was very rewarding and interesting. And, you wound up with great conversations with a number of the faculty members, too. But, I guess I keep kicking myself. What are we missing and where could it be? Because who knows? It's almost like if you open up a building there where something's been stored for decades, and there is. I mean, the Wagner Archives, which is at LaGuardia, but it's just, you just kick yourself on what could what could have, should have, and unfortunately is not. So I'm just hoping that the start that we were able to put things together at CUNY now would be able to, at least for future generations, and hopefully continuing, that they'll be able to document the great accomplishments of the CUNY student. Just hope the next generation carries on further. And, let me just say, in wrapping it up to some degree, I think we've become more conscious of our past and how advantageous it is to archive images like this so that they can show future generation what it was like and how it was like, and show the improvements that have taken place.
Right. Well, Stan, congratulations on a wonderful career, long career in New York, documenting the city and CUNY, and wishing you the best in retirement.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're way too young to retire.
I now help out my wife, so I run my wife's Uber service outside. But I thank you for the opportunity.
It was great having you. Great to talk to you.
Same here. Stay well, stay safe.
And you too.